Well, hello there, and welcome to this special live show about the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League, the best league in the business, and we cover it that way for a reason. I'm Dean Millard. I'll be sort of a host and an interviewee today, and joined, of course, by UFHL insider Larry Fisher. And Larry, this is where we're going to decide who is in the top five bubble, who is outside of the top five bubble, and maybe get a little bit more excitement than what the NHL had.
Yeah, it was a bit anticlimactic on the NHL front. Obviously, we saw the Buffalo Sabres retain first overall. The only alteration was obviously Seattle jumped ahead of Anaheim, but there wasn't a lot of suspense there. But Dean, yourself and I, we've been following and covering the Edmonton Oilers throughout the 2010s. We're all too familiar with draft lotteries and the excitement or the build-up to this event. So for the UFHL, this is the second draft lottery. We had one last summer, but certainly the first live show. And it is exciting to see how this plays out and which franchises. There could be potential for two lottery winners to jump from outside the top five into that top five grouping that bids on first overall. So can't wait to see how this plays out today.
You know, I was just half expecting the Oiler logo to be there at number one today, even though I knew they didn't have a chance. I just thought maybe there would be an Oiler logo there for old time's sakes. And yeah, you're right. Those draft lotteries were pretty wild to watch at times, and sometimes the only entertainment that an Oiler fan at that time could get. So I'm going to be we're going to switch roles later on in the show, and you're going to interview me after we get to the draft lottery. But Rob Love of the Tornadoes, the GM of the Tornadoes, and Fantalytica Scouting is going to join us as well, because he has an opportunity to win that first overall pick. And there's going to be hopefully some excitement. I'm not too worried about movement, because I know where we are and where we can drop to and what it'll be. But, you know, maybe we'll get some draft strategy out of Rob and myself today. Who knows? I guess we'll have to see. But maybe we should start, Larry, with do you want to start with what happened in the NHL a little bit more, or do you want to go with maybe the lottery odds for what we're talking about in the UFHL right now?
Yeah, I think if there was more of a suspense coming out of the NHL, we could talk more about that. Although it's great to see Seattle move up and be second overall. It would have been cool to see them win the lottery, just the expansion franchise and obviously Ron Francis being there. But I think from the UFHL perspective, the odds are the same as they were for the NHL. So here you see the percentages for each of the franchises, and obviously we've paired them up 1 to 16 with their NHL counterparts, and we're going to be using the Tankathon.com simulator to a one-shot deal to obviously simulate our draft lottery today. So Dean will bring that up later, and we'll run it. But Dean's Duckman's Domination have the best odds at 16.6%. Duckman's Domination, the Royals, who own the Tornadoes, pick at number 2, and the Assassins, who owned actually the Seattle Kraken, the Bentley Jacks expansion franchise in the UFHL, traded their pick to the Assassins just last week. So the Assassins, the Royals, and Duckman's Domination are guaranteed to be bidding on first overall, because the furthest they can fall is 2 spots. So 1 to 3 will stay in the top 5. Then you get Assassins have a second pick in the top 5, and then you have Rob Love kind of in that spot where it's a bit iffy at number 5 overall, with the Tornadoes owning the Assassins pick. So if 2 of the top 5 franchises win the draft lottery, the 2 lottery spots, then Rob Love is safe at 5th overall. If not, he could drop down as far as 7th, which would be bidding on 3rd overall, with 5 franchises bidding on every pick. So either way, Rob's bidding on a top 3 pick, whether it's 1st overall, 2nd overall, or 3rd overall. But there you see the 16 franchises that missed the playoffs in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League and the odds they have of winning today's UFHL draft lottery.
All right, and when it comes to draft picks heading into this, Tornadoes and Duckman's Domination leading the way, which is why the 2 GMs of that franchise are on there, and very different. You know, we are front-loaded with first-round picks, and the Tornadoes have a heavy amount of second-round picks.
Yeah, between yourself, Duckman's Domination, obviously you have the affiliation with Craig Button. So between yourself and Craig and George Batchel, as well as obviously Rob Love with the Fantalytica connection, you guys are going to kind of dominate the 2021 UFHL entry auction. barring some trade movement between now and July 24th when the entry auction will be held. But certainly you guys are loaded up. You'll be coming away with a lot of good prospects for the future of the Tornadoes and Duckmans franchises. And then, the Assassins have 5 picks, including 3 firsts. So they're a new ownership group. They're looking to make their mark. They're going to be in the bidding for first overall. So they have an exciting entry auction to come in July. And then there's 6 franchises that have 3 picks each, including the Mystics, who actually have 3 first-round picks: Kryptonites, Eliminators, Brutes, Strong Island, and Titans. So a bulk of the picks are within that group. And then you look at the other end, Dean, and there are a number of franchises that have, I think there's 9 franchises that have 0 picks, or 8 franchises. And then another grouping of around that same number, 9, I believe, that have 1 pick. So, but again, July 24th is a long way away. We have an expansion draft between now and then. Some franchises are going to take on bodies for their protected list. If they have spots they want to upgrade, maybe they're going to part with some of these picks that they've stockpiled. But certainly there's some franchises that are probably going to be pretty jealous and pretty envious on July 24th when Duckmans and Tornadoes are dominating the UFHL entry auction.
Yeah, it's gonna be really something to see. And the NHL had their draft lottery, and they had their GMs in their draft areas. Let's take a look at the live look at our GMs right now on tankathon.com. This is what we'll be using. I don't want to hit too many buttons right now because I don't want to accidentally set one off. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in a guy who's hoping to win that lottery, pick his brain a little bit. Rob Love, GM of the Tornadoes, and of course with Fantalytica, is going to join us in just a few seconds here. All right, let's get back to the action as we bring in the GM of the Tornadoes and the man behind Fantalytica, Rob Love. Rob, first of all, thanks very much for joining us on the program today. Not much excitement in that NHL draft. I think I'm guessing you're hoping for some excitement, or maybe you want it to less excited, so you just stay in that top 5 bubble.
Yeah, so it's a double front. I wanted the Red Wings to win first overall in real life, but then, I wanted to see I hope that the Tornadoes can also potentially have an opportunity to pick in that range as well. So, either way, I'm happy with how it all ended up. There's a bunch of guys that, are going to fall a little bit more than they should. So wherever we end up, we're really excited.
Yeah, and the one thing I love talking to fantasy GMs in this scenario is the difference between drafting in the NHL and drafting for fantasy. We have specific categories we know we are looking at. How different is your kind of rankings for the actual draft and maybe possible rankings for a fantasy draft? Are they much different, or is there is there a big difference between the two, or just maybe a slight difference with a lot of similarities?
Yeah, so I'd say as you get deeper into the draft, it's going to change a lot. I would say that the top 10, it's not really going to change too much. There might be a couple of guys, like maybe 1 or 2, that I would potentially take in, the late 9, 10, 11 area that maybe wouldn't go in real life. But in general, I'd say that this year's top 5, it's pretty on par with fantasy. Just having to consider peripherals. Sometimes it's kind of hard to track the, hits and blocks from some of these prospects. So, usually the NHL teams get it right. So we're just going to go with that. And obviously we have our own research that we've done. So yeah, I would say it's not that much different, but we'll see.
But I guess this year is wide open, Rob. Even in the NHL, right? There is no Connor McDavid available this year. There's no, even Rasmus Dahlin or whoever the case, right? There's a group of about 10 prospects that could potentially go first overall. I know Owen Power is sort of emerged as the consensus favorite to go first overall, but he didn't have the wire to wire like a Connor McDavid or Sidney Crosby. There's not that big name. What are the chances that you think that in the UFHL entry auction, we could see a different first overall pick than we do in the NHL entry draft, simply because in the UFHL, you know, you're bidding on the pick. So 5 franchises are bidding on first overall. Whoever wins first overall then gets to announce their prospect. So I'm really interested to see if that prospect that's taken first overall matches up with the NHL. But do you think there's a possibility we see a different first overall pick in the UFHL than what is likely to happen in the NHL?
Definitely. Yeah. I would say there's no doubt about it. I mean, if we're assuming that Power goes first overall in real life, I think there's a pretty decent chance, depending on who wins this first overall auction, we could absolutely see somebody other than Power go first. I think it's completely feasible to consider any of these guys in the top 10 really in fantasy. I mean, there's a lot of positives for any of these guys in the top 10. I'd say that the first 10 guys off the board in our league are going to be the same 10 guys that go in the top 10 in real life, but I'd say that the order is going to be quite different. I'd say that's for sure in my mind.
For sure. And what about obviously the fact that the Tornadoes are backloaded? Dean sort of brought up that discrepancy. Duckmans have 5 first-round picks, although a chunk of them are right at the last Duckmans owns draft picks for a lot of the franchises that are still playing in the UFHL Klein Cup playoffs, so they're going to be in that 24 to 32 range. But talk about the strategy and just the idea that obviously you can leverage Fanalytica here because you do have 9 second-round picks, and you mentioned that's the area where maybe you're looking at some guys that slipped into the 3rd or 4th rounds in the NHL draft, but your tool tells you that this player's value is worthy of a second-round pick. When you win that auction for 46th overall or whatever it is, you may take somebody off the board technically.
Yeah, so there's actually a couple of reasons that I decided to do that. So first of all, I felt that once I joined the league, I felt that there was a blatant disregard for that true value of what a second round pick should be in a trade. And that's obviously not a slight to anybody else. It's more of me prioritizing the asset, right? And so because I have Fanalytica, because of, I'd like to say that my experience has helped me so far, I believe that a second round pick can absolutely be as valuable as a first round pick with the right research. And so that's why I went and stacked as many second rounders as I could. A lot of times they were throw-ins. And so not only can I use them to make the pick, but I could also use them as an asset to move, right? So I have a lot more room to make some moves at the draft. And I think it's just a better scenario to be in than to not have picks and be asking to trade for one.
You have, like Duckman's Domination affiliation, obviously, and you have Fanalytica .tech as the scouting agency. When you have those options going into a draft, because, drafts can change, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, I wasn't expecting them to take that player with that pick. Now this person is available, or whatever it might be. It's always fluid. I love the fact that, if I'm drafting a player from my affiliated scouting agency, it's helping me be cost effective because I'm basically paying myself because it's within our family, and depending on the partnership you have set up, that also allows me to go spend a little bit more on somebody else. So, for the partnerships, they can be massive at draft time and give you a lot of options. You certainly don't have to do that, but it just gives you more options of when you're bidding on certain picks and certain players at spots, in my opinion. Yeah,
there's the best way to look at it is you want to have as many options as possible at the draft table. I mean, being able to have a gluttony of picks to move or be in disposal of allows you to just have more room to make moves, allow more room to move up and not feel like you're getting swindled in a trade. And like you said, having either scouts that you have in your agency, picking those players that those scouts own, right? It's in a way house money, right? And so with all that being said, I'm extremely confident that walking away from this draft, I'll feel very happy about the picks we've made. Potentially, if we move any picks, at the end of the day, I'm really excited to have this amount of picks, and I know that there's going to be a couple of people knocking on my door to see what the price tag of some of these picks are, and I know that you'll feel the same way, Dean.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to being flexible, and whether you use those picks or not, especially when a second round pick is so valuable because we only have 2 rounds. So it's pretty good. Larry, I'll give you the last word on this one as I get the rest of this next segment set up. So you can have the last question with Rob here.
Yeah, Rob led into that perfect. I think the value of those second round picks, what they were in January and February, is going to be a lot different than they are close to the expansion draft and on draft day. The value goes up. People that don't have any picks, or we've seen, half the league has either 0 picks or 1 pick. A lot of those franchises are going to want to draft a prospect. So your guys' phone lines, Rob, especially with 9 second round picks, people are going to come calling for them, and what you paid to get those picks, you're going to be able to extract a lot more if you decide to move them. And the other part of that, Rob, obviously, you have moved some picks from future years. A pick, you move a pick in 2023 that lands you Jesse Puljujarvi and Sam Steele. So looking at the Tornadoes protected list, I know we're still a ways out from July 17th, more than a month away, but you look at that list and there's maybe some room, some spots there, whether it's at defense or forward, but there's some room there that you could possibly move a couple more of these second round picks to other franchises that have guys that are going to be exposed that they don't want to lose for nothing. Tornadoes maybe grab some of those guys for a second round pick.
I feel like you're trying to expose me, Larry. I feel like I feel like that's maybe the cat is now out of the bag if it wasn't already out of the bag. But yeah, I mean, to be so young on my team and a lot of the guys that potentially I would be keeping, some of them don't have to be, all right. And so you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's just some teams have to lose a player and they don't have picks. I can take on a player or two, and I have a lot of picks, right? So there's a lot of opportunity to make some moves at the draft. I'm certainly not going to be overly eager to let my picks go to anybody else. So the price does have to be right, like any trade. But I'm really excited to have 17% of the draft in my hands. So we'll see what happens with that.
That's impressive stuff. Rob, thanks so much for joining us. Best of luck. And just for people out there that are looking maybe for a little help on the scouting side or for information, just give us a brief description of what they can find with Fanalytica.
Yeah, so Fanalytica is basically the one-stop shop, I like to call it at least, for your fantasy hockey. So if you're in a dynasty league, any UFF owners or participants that are watching this right now, if you need help or feel like you need additional research to figure out if a prospect's going to be good in your league, Fanalytica does exactly that. So you get to input your Dynasty League scoring rules, and once you submit that, you're going to get a huge table with about 20 to 25 leagues of prospects at your disposal, and it's going to actually tell you what we expect from a point-producing standpoint, what those prospects will do in your league. And so on top of that, actually, Fanalytica, we've been talking a little bit in the Scout group chat, but Fanalytica is going to be coming out soon with a UFF Scout-specific product where we're going to be supporting 84 of the best leagues in the world from ages 15 and up. And what that's going to allow scouts to do is go into the table, go into the platform. You're going to immediately see which players are available or unavailable, who owns them, if they're a free agent, how they're going to do in the UFF league once they're an NHL player, and potentially how much their market value is. So I don't want to reveal too much, but I do believe that it's going to be available to be used in some capacity before the draft. So I'll be using that, but I don't know if it will be for public use. I think we'll still be in testing mode. But so that's what Fanalytica is. We like to help a lot of players in their league. So hopefully, if you haven't heard about it now, go check it out. It might be able to help your league and your team.
All right. What's the site?
Fanalytica.tech. So FANTALYTICA.tech. That might be a mouthful, but yeah.
We'll get it figured out. Excellent stuff, Rob. Thanks so much for joining us, and best of luck in the draft lottery coming up.
Yep. Thanks, Dean. Thanks, Larry.
All right, there's Rob Love, the GM of the Tornadoes and the owner of Fanalytica. All right, Larry, it is just about time for us to get this going. Give me a couple of seconds. Enjoy this music. We'll be back with Tankathon and the Draft Lottery in just 1 second. right. Now that we know all the strategies, and that was the point of this show, is for me to just figure out all the people around me and what sort of strategies they'll have for the draft. I think it's time for us to get to the actual draft lottery. What do you say, Larry?
Absolutely. Can't wait to see how this plays out.
All right. So I'm going to bring in tankathon.com. And then I'm just going to hit the sim lottery button at the top, and then I'll just let you take it away with the results. I might be popping champagne. I don't really know, but here we go, Larry. I'm going to get this going. The simulation is complete.
And there you have it. Rob would be happy. Obviously, the Detroit Red Wings were a winner in this simulation. And for the UFHL, the Detroit Red Wings are the Eliminators. So congratulations to Luke Schonwise of the Eliminators. Moves up from 6th into the top. So he would have been bidding on 2nd overall. Now gets a chance to bid on 1st overall and actually bumps out Rob Love, unfortunately, with the Tornadoes. So Rob Love will move down one spot and be bidding on 2nd overall instead of 1st overall. But Luke Schonwise and the Eliminators, who are representing the Detroit Red Wings, have won the draft lottery and moved up. And Duckman's Domination, Dean, is the big winner. You were guaranteed to stay in the top 5 regardless, but much like the NHL, the Buffalo Sabres won the Tankathon simulator, and that's representative of Duckman's Domination. So a big congratulations to Duckmans, who officially are 1st overall now, and also to Luke Schonwise of the Eliminators, represented by Detroit, who have moved from 6th overall in the UFHL up to 2nd overall, which gets them moving from bidding on 2nd overall up into the 1st overall grouping.
So, well, thank you for the congratulations. We worked really hard to get this today, about as hard as the Oilers have worked for all those. And I certainly hope this isn't the start of an Oilers type run for 1st overall picks for Duckman's Domination. We'll take a high pick next year as well, probably with the Shane Wright sweepstakes coming in and our affiliation with High Level Scouting. But we're extremely happy. But let's round out the top 5 as far as UFHL franchises that will be bidding in that opening bubble. Can you run through those?
Yeah, so 1st overall is Duckman's Domination, the Eliminators, the Royals, and Assassins ×2. Assassins have both the Seattle and New Jersey picks. So Jeremy Latta and Nolan Reinhart, and obviously their scout, Trevor Zimmer, will be very happy. They're taking up 2 of the 5 spots, which guarantees them to bid on both 1st overall and 2nd overall. So even if they were to win that bidding war for 1st overall, they would still have one sitting there for 2nd overall as well. So the Assassins have a potential to pick 1st and 2nd overall if they win both those bidding wars at the entry auction. But Duckmans, Royals, Assassins, and the Eliminators make up that grouping of 5, I guess 4 franchises bidding on 1st overall, because the Assassins are in there twice.
This is kind of funny. This ended up being a little bit backwards. I should have been the first interview because I ended up first. We could have got Rob's reaction, getting them back out about dropping out. But now's the point of the show where you take over with the questions. And, as the NHL, they would interview the GM with the 1st overall pick, and we'll do the same here. So I also have some shots of the players, a graphic too, that I can bring in. So I'll let you take away the rest of this interview.
Sounds good, Dean. And obviously just your first reaction, I guess, to seeing Duckman's Domination at the top. I know you said you don't want it to be an Oilers type run of consecutive 1st overall picks, although the affiliation with High Level and the potential to get Shane Wright in 2022 is attractive. But just maybe your thoughts on how the draft lottery played out, the fact there's only 4 bidders instead of 5. That eliminates one of the competitors at least. But talk about your approach going into the big sweepstakes with 1st overall.
Well, I'm extremely happy to only be bidding against 3 other teams. So just eliminating the competition right there helps. I'm really interested to see, I think what Rob said earlier about the first overall pick, if Owen Power does go first overall in the NHL, whether he goes first overall in our league. I'm not really sure that. I think what I kind of agree with Rob. I think there might be, a guy like, Matty Beniers, or, there's some pretty quality players. I know Craig was pretty high on Dylan Guenther at one point. The reason I'm excited about just being in that bubble is, if I think the bidding for that first overall pick is too much, I can easily back out of it, because I know there's a couple of players that I can identify. And I guess just one clarification: last year, if you didn't make your pick by a certain time, you were kind of stuck with a player. That will be different this year. So can you be a little bit more patient, I think, as an owner or a GM? Is that the case this year with your bidding on picks?
It is, and so the way it works, Dean, is obviously there's a minimum bid for each draft pick established by an algorithm based on scout spending. So if nobody bid on the pick, but you're not bidding on a specific player, you're bidding on the right to pick at a spot. So you already know roughly what the minimum bid is going to be for every pick in the UFHL entry auction. So the owners that are in that grouping should be willing to bid at least at that minimum bid price. But if by some chance, Dean, we got to 5th overall and none of the 5 franchises bid, and the clock ran out and nobody wanted 5th overall, then whoever was the highest franchise in that grouping would still get 5th overall at the algorithm set price. But the algorithm just moves its way down regardless. So that could happen still in theory if 5 franchises end up in a group and nobody bid, but it's very unlikely, because those prices. Right. You've known them since the start of the season. You should have saved up that much money to get a minimum bid. And of course, when it gets to 5th overall, 4 prospects are taken. Well, there's a lot of guys in that top 10 that everybody wants a piece of. So the chances of none of the 5 franchises bidding on that spot would be it would be stunning to see. And I can't imagine it'll happen. I think we'll have franchises will come prepared, and everybody will be willing to at least put in the minimum bid at each spot.
Yeah, it's and it just like we talked about with Rob, so much strategy comes into it. We're, as you mentioned, we have the first overall pick, and then a lot of picks in the back end. And one of my strategies that we're looking at is, we're going to use a bunch of those back end picks on players that high level scouting has in their stable, so it makes it more cost effective. I'm not sure I can do that on the front end. Maybe Jesper Wallstedt could go in the top 5. I think that might be a bit of a reach. I'd really like for it to happen in the NHL, but I'm not sure about that either. But our strategy might be, bid on anybody. We'll identify the player in the top 5, and then on the back end in the second round, we're probably going to identify more players off of the high level to make it cost effective. And if they end up getting taken before we get to them, then we just benefit from the return on the investment. So I really love the flexibility that this many picks gives me. As mentioned, I don't want this to be a regular occurrence, but it's still a pretty proud day, and I think a fun day for a franchise to know that they are at the top. Even in our auction system, it's a neat footnote in our, or I should say, web note in our history of our webbed feet history.
Absolutely. And Rob, I like how Rob termed that. You're playing with house money. If you're you're bidding on however high those picks go in that 24 to 31 range, if you win the bidding, which you're going to, you got 4 picks in that range at the back end of the first round. If you win those picks, you're going to be likely targeting guys that high level scouting owns, and then you're actually just paying the league percentage in order to draft your own guys that are already essentially somewhat in the system through the affiliation with high level. So there are still some franchises that don't have affiliated scouts, and if they're listening, they're probably going, oh no, I should have had an affiliated scout, because this is where you make that back. You sort of help fund the affiliated scout throughout the year, and you make it back. But you look here, Dean, at the UFFS Scouts mid-season rankings, and we do have Owen Power on top, which obviously Craig Button, Bob McKenzie, a lot of the NHL scouts, Sam Costantino. Owen Power has sort of become the consensus number 1 guy. I think Bob McKenzie was 10 out of 10 on his NHL scouts that he pulled, but obviously the Matty Beniers, Dylan Guenther, William Eklund. Again, when you mention fantasy and the offensive flair, and forwards tend to still produce more in fantasy than defensemen and goaltenders in the UFHL. So I think those three names are going to go fairly high, likely in the in that top 5 somewhere. Then you got a guy like Luke Hughes, who everybody knows is Jack and Quinn Hughes' younger, bigger brother. So he's obviously an interesting name. His season was cut short by injury, so we didn't get to see him at the U18s, where maybe he would have been a dominant player and challenged Owen Power for first overall with.
Well, I think we may have lost Larry in that connection. There has been some terrible internet connection across the West in Canada. It might have something to do with the 30-degree temperatures that we're having. But as he was, I think, going to get to, some of these guys, Brant Clarks, Simon Edvinsson, they're in the top 5s of some scouts out there in the national level. Craig Button has those guys in his top 5, and we talked about Brant Clark and Kent Johnson on tracking the draft earlier today with Craig Button. So it will be interesting. I think Kent Johnson has an opportunity to go in that top 5 bubble as well. If you're looking at forwards, Jesper Wallstedt, the top goaltender from Sweden, and his teammate Fabian Lysell, a left winger, rounding out the top 10. And as the NHL draft might be defense heavy in the first going, we could very well, and I'm going to predict we are going to be the opposite. You look at a lot of people's top 5, there's one forward in a lot of those, as Larry is back with us, and I'm almost predicting a swap. Like, I think Kent Johnson could slip into that top 5 in the UFHL bubble at some point. So while the NHL could be 4D and a forward, we could be 4 forwards and a D.
We definitely could, Dean. And you mentioned Kent Johnson. Obviously, Rob Love was our guest today. He's in Detroit. He knows all about the University of Michigan, where Owen Power, Matty Beniers, and Kent Johnson all played this season. 3 dynamic players that are likely going to be top 10 picks, both in the NHL and the UFHL. But you're right, that order could definitely change. And Kent Johnson's one of those kids who has a ton of offensive creativity, offensive flair, one of the flashier players in this draft class, as well as Fabian Lysell at 10th overall in the UFFS midseason rankings. And he might be a prospect, although I think, at that spot with those rankings, some might have thought that was high. I know Brian Hernandez from Azteca Scouting actually had Fabian Lysell at number 2 at the midseason rankings. And a lot of people like him. He's another flashy player who has the potential to really put up a lot of fantasy points. So a guy like Fabian Lysell, and he was really good at the U18s, Dean. He was him and Isaac Rosen both were really exciting players to watch for Sweden up front. And so I think those two guys, including Fabian Lysell, could go higher in the UFHL entry auction than he does in the NHL draft. But you mentioned the goaltender, Jesper Wallstedt, who obviously is property of high-level scouting. And the one thing you do need in any fantasy league is a quality starting goaltender. And some of these franchises that are bidding on first overall, and obviously the 4 that don't win first overall will be there bidding on second overall, third overall, so on. A lot of those franchises, you look at their roster and their protected list, and they don't have that surefire number 1 goaltender. So I think even if Jesper Wallstedt goes at 10 or 12 in the NHL draft, the uncertainty over that group of 10 ahead of him, and the fact that franchises need a number 1 goalie in the UFHL, I think we could see Jesper Wallstedt be selected a little higher in the UFHL entry auction than he goes in the NHL draft. That said, the Buffalo Sabres are picking first overall. They love their Swedes. There are a lot of Swedes there with Simon Edvinsson and Fabian Lysell, but I wouldn't be surprised they need a goaltender really bad in Buffalo, although they have UPL, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who made his NHL debut at the end of the season, and Eric Portillo, the goaltender at Michigan, is also a Buffalo prospect. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Sabres have legitimate interest in Jesper Wallstedt as well. So he could end up in that top 5 in the NHL, which obviously would help the chances for high-level scouting of him being selected in the top 5 in the UFHL.
I had no idea my wife was such a big fan of Swedes. Fabian Lysell and Jesper Wallstedt. I better not ever plan a trip to Sweden. She might not come back She's such a big fan of Swedes, going all out for those two players. But if they go higher, that would be great. And, we talked about Kent Johnson on Tracking the Draft today, and Craig Button, he's not saying this isn't going to be the same exact player, but similarities to Elias Pettersson in Vancouver as far as, the playmaking abilities, the way he thinks the game and things like that. And again, he's not saying he's going to be that guy, but has the similar tendencies. So I think, after hearing that today, I think people should be pretty excited about Kent Johnson. And I think people should be excited about, what's coming up in this league. We've, now we've done the draft lottery, the draft lottery odds, the NHL playoffs and the Klein Cup playoffs continue. And, lots for playoff and non-playoff teams to be busy with right now in the UFHL, Larry.
And now that this draft order is set, Dean, at least for the first, obviously the first 16 picks, as well as the 8 franchises that were eliminated in the first round of the Klein Cup playoffs, they're locked in now as well. So there's only 8 picks to be decided in both the first and second rounds, and that's the 8 franchises still playing in the second round of the Klein Cup playoffs. Works the same as the NHL as far as how the draft order plays out based on playoff results. But certainly now I think that this draft order is decided. The eliminators are up. Now all of a sudden maybe the eliminators draft pick, Luke Schonwise, might be getting some texts, some DMs on Telegram right now already asking if he's willing to move that chance at bidding at first overall. But his pick went up in value certainly. And now we'll see, now that they're locked in, the Assassins with 2 of those picks, they have the luxury, if they wanted, to move down a few spots with their second pick, let somebody else into that top 5 bidding and still be there at second or third overall for a second pick as well. So we could see some movement now of draft picks now that top of the first round is locked in and everybody knows sort of what grouping they're going to be in. And then the other big thing, Dean, and we can talk about this with Duckmans as well, because we talked about it with Rob, but a lot of the attention for the 16 franchises that weren't part of the Klein Cup playoffs and the 8 franchises that were knocked out in the first round, their attention is turning towards that expansion draft on July 17th. That's the next big event for all these UFHL franchises, and making trades to improve your protected list to put you in a better position to make the playoffs next season or compete. And for Duckmans, I assume it would be similar to what Rob said, Dean, that potentially maybe you move one of those late first round picks in order to bring in another forward or another defenseman, or possibly, I know, your goaltending is something that maybe is a bit up in the air still, but there's potential to, especially goaltending might be one to talk about, because a lot of franchises have 2 goaltenders and they can only protect one. They're going to be exposing a goalie. So there's going to be some goalies available in the UFHL. I know Darcy Kemper's name's out there already, among others, but there's going to be opportunities for Duckmans and some of these franchises that missed the playoffs to strengthen their roster by leveraging their draft capital, their draft picks ahead of that expansion draft.
Yeah, well, and we already started kind of looking into that, and then realized we couldn't when when Antti Ranta became available again, because we had traded him away. But we've actually been having a few conversations with a couple of different teams, involving players and draft picks and things like that. And then that sort of thing kind of ramps up now that where everybody's sitting. And I agree with that, with what Rob's strategy is to use. Obviously our first overall pick, that's going to be a massive deal if we are trading that. And by the way, we would be open to making a deal for that first overall pick if there are teams that want to get into that top 5 bubble. It's going to cost you a lot because we value that pick a lot. But the rest of our picks will be used in part to pick players, but in part to also add players instantly. So certainly part of the game plan. And again, with a lot of picks, you get a lot of flexibility, especially when you have an affiliation. It just gives you so many more options. And if you're building a franchise in this competitive a league where league fees are $1,000, you better not be starting your draft prep a day before, or else you might as well just burn your money. You have to do a lot of work. You have to be flexible, and you have to be able to make decisions on the fly, especially during the draft. I think as we go, Larry, we're going to see a lot more in draft deals. As the auction is still fairly new for a lot of people, so kind of one under the belt, and it's a different system. I think we could see some more action. So you definitely have to be prepared to make those decisions, in a split second or time sort of sensitive situations. And when you have picks, when you have flexibility, when you have an affiliation, you have flexibility. Just makes your decisions a lot more easier. As Craig Button always says, get as much information on a particular prospect as you can, and have as much flexibility as you can with those different options.
And and be proactive ahead of the draft. Like I said, the draft prep, get these conversations going now, because things happen fast on the draft floor. There's only a minute for each pick, right, of bidding, and then extensions of 30 seconds. If there's a bid in the last 30 seconds, it'll extend by 30. But essentially, that lottery or that UFHL entry auction moves quite quickly. There's not a ton of time to be negotiating trades on the draft floor. It's happening in real time, and things move quick. So if you're looking at moving up or down, you're going to know your draft order now. After the Klein Cup playoffs, you're going to have almost a month to prepare. So make sure you know where you want to be. And of course, things are going to happen, like you said, where somebody takes the guy you wanted, and now I'm not that interested in who's left, and maybe I want to trade down. But you got to have those conversations ahead of time, so you know who wants to move up, and you don't have to, now I got to start texting everybody that I might want to move down. You got to have that preparation done well in advance. And one guy who I know is listening to the podcast or to the live show today is Brennan Kopp, general manager of the Bentley Jacks. Obviously, they moved their lottery pick, the Seattle Kraken of the UFHL. They moved their lottery pick to the Assassins in exchange for another first-round pick that was part of this lottery. It was the Dynasty pick, which ended up now at 14th overall, so bidding on 9th overall for the Bentley Jacks. They still have a chance to bid on a top 10 pick, but I think the Bentley Jacks certainly are listening to the show today, and they're hearing what we're talking about, Dean, as far as, the Tornadoes and Duckmans might pluck a player ahead of time, and that's bad news for the Bentley Jacks, because they're obviously hoping that these franchises that are still going in the UFHL playoffs, these top 10 franchises that have 9 good forwards and, are going to have to expose 2 of those 9 because they can only protect 7. The Bentley Jacks are hoping those guys make it to the expansion draft and they can choose between those 2 extra forwards. They hope that one of them doesn't go to the Duckmans and one goes to the Tornadoes in advance. But Brennan Kopp's probably being the most proactive of all GMs. I know he already has over a handful of trades agreed to in principle, submitted that he plans to make that have expansion draft implications. He obviously made the one trade already with the lottery picks, but he has a number of trades in place already, and I'm sure he's going to make more between now and July 17th when those protected lists are due. But I think that's a cool aspect of these franchises trying to beat the Bentley Jacks to get these players ahead of that protected list deadline on July 17th, and that's probably the focus for all those franchises that are no longer part of the Klein Cup playoffs or missed the Klein Cup playoffs.
Indeed, lots of work certainly to be done, and we went a little bit of overtime today. We just bumped the episode of Barney Miller that we were going to run after us on here, so it's not a big deal. We'll just we'll move that back a little bit. But as far as programming that we do have going on, every second Sunday we've got you and Darren on the UFFS podcast. Massive announcement, obviously, about the Legends League in football, American football last week. 2 Minute Tuesday with Darren is always a hit recapping stuff. The latest edition of Tracking the Draft with Craig Button and myself is available right here on UFSN. We'll have Full Count Fantasy Baseball tomorrow morning, and then you and I are back at it again on Friday with UFHL Now, and all of that can be found right there on the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. And if you're interested in listening to some other audio shows, you can check out podcastalley.ca. So an eventful night. At least we had, I think, a little bit more drama than the NHL. And we had a GM that dropped out to appear on our show and a GM that won the draft lottery. So we got all the connections here on the UFSN.
Absolutely, Dean, and congratulations again to Duckman's domination, as well as to Luke Schonwise and the Eliminators, who were the franchise that bumped out Rob Love and the Tornadoes from that bidding overall. So the consolation prize for Rob Love, he's right there at 2nd overall still. He only fell 1 spot, not 2. So he's down at 6th overall. And actually, ironically, Dean, the franchise, the Eliminators that were representing the Detroit Red Wings, who Rob really was pulling for in the NHL draft lottery, comes in and wins the UFHL draft lottery and jumps up to second lottery spot, which obviously is one of the 5 franchises or 4 franchises now, with the Assassins having 2 spots, but in that group to bid on first overall.
Awesome stuff, Larry. Thanks for joining me. These live shows are so much fun. It reminds me of the actual live TV and radio days that I used to live on, and be able to cover the best league in the world as far as fantasy in the proper way that it deserves. And I know the owners and GMs that are watching out there certainly appreciate the work that you put into this. So thanks very much. I'm very grateful to have the first overall pick, and let the text messages and the DMs begin if people want to get their hands on it. We'll be back again on Friday for UFHL Now. Thanks once again, Larry.
Thanks for having me, Dean. Looking forward to Friday.